mi gente. Dímelo, mi gente. Welcome back to the 4th season of Oye Mi Gente podcast. Thank you so much for sticking with us and tuning in. This is Moran. I'm a multimedia artist from South Jamaica, Queens. At this moment, I would like to start us off with our daily affirmation. I want to invite you all, my beautiful gods and goddesses, and everyone in between who tune in every week. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. I invite you to join in as well. Affirmation. I give myself space to grow and learn. I allow myself to be who I am without judgment. Now that we have charged our inner spirit crystals, I will now introduce our guest, the incomparable Connie Chavez. Connie Chavez was born in Lima, Peru, but calls New York City home. She is a self-taught filmmaker and photographer with a passion for entrepreneurship, solidarity work, and visual storytelling. Through her use of filmmaking and photography, her visual activism aims to reeducate and uplift communities. Connie started her career when she started her first company, Hip Hop Zombies. HHZ was an underground hip-hop website dedicated to showcasing the most lyrical, undiscovered artists and telling their story via an intimate interview. HHZ joined forces with Daily Motion as their exclusive content partner and began working with brands such as Hot 97, Power 1051, This Is 50, Pro Era Crew, and Jack Thriller. After having worked in the hip-hop industry for a few years, she discovered her passion for storytelling and decided to pursue filmmaking. Connie fell in love with the art of cinematography and ultimately decided to create a production company, Connie Chavez Films. In 2015, she became the video production manager for Latina magazine, where she had the privilege of interviewing celebrities, cultural icons, and thought leaders from around the world. While working in the media, she began to notice the discrepancies in representation and injustices plaguing her community, which ultimately led her down the path of visual activism. Since then, she has centered her career on empowering her community. Connie's work has appeared in outlets such as NBC, Now This, Her, Remezcla, NPR, Refinery 29, Fierce by Me Too, AJ Plus, and Afropunk. Over the last 5 years, her company, Connie Chavez Films, has worked with clients such as Tidal, Me Too, Goya Foods, and Maya Impact to produce videos that entertain but educate the audiences. Hi, Connie. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Woo!
Woo, woo, woo.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm happy to be here. It's always a blessing to wake up and be amongst loved ones.
Yo,
so thank you
facts.
for inviting me.
Facts. How's your spirit?
Today, it's feeling a lot lighter for many reasons, but because I'm here with a person that I truly love, and it's, giving me a safe space to talk about my identity and my history.
Awesome. It's one of the main reasons why I created, this podcast, so we can all have a better conversation about our own identities.
Absolutely, and thank you. I feel like this is such a labor of love for you.
Yes,
And
yes.
somebody has to archive our joy and our happiness. I feel like this is something that we don't really talk about. Like, we're not out here sitting next to each other and being like, so tell me about your immigration story.
Yo, facts.
So just archiving it is like powerful.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely time that we tell our own stories, because it's almost every single book that I have tried to read, whether if it's from like spiritual religions or different types of religions, even on our own country and our own, history, everything has been written by white people.
You ain't never lie, Vib. You ain't ever lie.
So, to start the interview, I would like to offer you to take a deep breath with me.
Thank you.
This interview may get a bit heavy, and I want to make sure that I'm able to hold space for these feelings as well.
Thank you.
Ready? Take a deep breath. Okay, let's start. Let's take it back to your parents' story for a bit. Who are Mrs. and Mr. Chavez? What were their lives like before migrating to the U.S.?
Mr. and Mrs. Chavez. All right. So my mom is the lovely Carmen Chavez, and my dad is Juan Chavez. And they are honestly childhood sweethearts. It's pretty fucking adorable. Can I curse? I'm sorry.
Yes!
Yeah, they're childhood sweethearts. So my mom was born in Lince, Lima, Peru, and then traveled to Breña, and then finally settled in La Victoria, La Rica Vicky, when she was 9. And my dad as well. He's from Giron Lampa, and then he migrated to Apolo, La Victoria, where he lived on the same block as my mom when they were 9 years old and 7 years old. Yeah, so it's a lot of history in La Rica Vicky.
Yo, for real. I mean, like, I've always heard, like, I don't remember if I ever been to La Victoria, but I know my dad always, like, raves about, or used to rave. We don't no longer talk, but, you know, it's definitely has importance.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very big cultural hub that a lot of people really can sweep La Victoria under the rug, but it's really such a powerful place because people didn't have a lot of options and they had to be very innovative. And, you know, my family including had to really just create things out of nothing. And my mother's side of the family created La Farmacia de Huánuco in La Victoria, which was also like a place where community would meet. You know, my grandma is not a doctor, but she was considered a healer there. And people would just go to her and be like, yo, like, my throat hurts. What can you help me? And because people didn't have enough money to go to the doctor, they would just go to my grandma's pharmacy, and she would just like hook them up. And also for like the LGBTQ community, you know, my family is very accepting, and back in the day when like people would like come in after being like violently beat, you know, like gay men, my mom would tell me, is like gay men would come into our pharmacy to help so we can clean them up their scars so they can go back out at night to make money, you know. So I feel like the people of La Victoria are like so resilient because they've been, you know, underserved, they've been forgotten, and people just got to figure it out. And I think a lot of that feeling and emotion of my parents' experience has quite literally like come into my spirit in how I maneuver my life today. So shout out to La Victoria.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I feel like with certain places like that, because I mean, like, all our home countries, they got some hood ass, like, hood. People always say, you know, I'm from the hood, but you got a front yard. But you from the hood, but you got a front yard, you know. But when you go to like
there are hoods
like
with
Peru,
front lawn. Yo,
yeah.
Shout out to LA. Shout out to to California. Yo, them hoods have the most beautiful front lawns.
Yes.
But that be the hood.
The hood, the hood, and a lot of these places, you know, in Peru in particular, because you know we Peruvian, a lot of like these hoods, they're completely resilient. They have like their own little stores. That's like the neighborhood where people know you, know who you are, you know, accept you for who you are. And it's like you could be, you know, like your family, the family that you run to for when you need it the most. So with your parents, you know, what did they do before?
My mother graduated as a psychologist, and my father graduated as an engineer.
You know, it's really interesting with our Peruvian parents, our fathers, you know, a lot of them have engineering backgrounds. When I interviewed Kat, engineer as well. My dad, engineer blueprinting, you know. So it's like, I feel that is like almost the top thing that most Peruvian men end up going for. Like, engineering is like the top career.
Yeah.
In Peru.
It's really interesting. I think my father's path to becoming an engineer, just because I feel like his story of like his connection with his mom and my grandmother and his father is very rooted from what I've noticed to a lot of people's other narratives. Like, Peru is 70% single parent homes, and that was very true for my father's experience. So him growing up without a father, and then a mother that just was working all the time. He really was also out of options. And, you know, and in his mind, he was just thinking survival. What can I get a degree in, you know, that is just going to give me a roof under me, you know, what was going to provide for my brother, my uncle. And he actually enrolled in military school, Loncio Prado, which was a boarding school, military boarding school, because like he was just like, I need a place to live, you know. So I think a lot of decisions in my parents' experiences were made out of survival. And even when I asked them, you know, preparing for this podcast, I asked them, like, you know, like, let me know a couple more things about you guys. And it was literally every response they were giving me was like, I was like, oh, so did you want to migrate? You know, were your feelings? He was like, I really didn't think it through. I just didn't have options. It was like that. I didn't really think it through. It was just like, that's what I had to do. And I was like, fuck, that's such a, like, I don't even notice how many times a day I can make a choice, opposed to them being like, no, man, like, it wasn't about, did I want to? Can't? No, it was like, now, because, porque si no, you know what I mean? Like, because nothing's going to happen.
It's like la necesidad. You know, like you get married, you have a family, and you think it's all going to be good. And then, boom, the rug gets pulled right under you. And
Absolutely.
You're like, fuck, what am I going to do? But you can't really sit there and think like, fuck, what are my options? Like, nah, you just got to, we out. That's it. Pack your bags. We're leaving. You know?
And that was true for my mom, too. Becoming a psychologist was not easy. You know, growing up in a very patriarchal home, toxic masculinity, unfortunately, that drove my mom to be one of the first people to actually graduate with a degree. She's like a first, first generation college graduate. And that's also out of necessity. Like, my grandparents were like, nah, girl, like, you either work in la farmacia, you know, or you go to college, or you know what, forget that, you got to do both. You know, like they hit my mom with so many different decisions for her life. They made all the decisions for her life.
When did they migrate?
1993. They first came to the United States.
What pushed them to make that decision, leave everything behind for the U.S.?
Woo! Well, that is quite a story. Unfortunately, there's like so many layers to it. The layers that I will touch upon is, you know, the Peruvian economy because of Fujimori, el super paquetazo, which made all the prices go from like, say something was like $3, it went up to like $30 overnight. So people were quite literally thrown into poverty, my family included. And then just terrorism plaguing, you know, Peru, Sendero Luminoso, government corruption, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people credit Sendero Luminoso to do all these heinous acts, but, you know, quite literally the military was doing it as well, and within the, you know, the different branches of government as well. So it felt like un terremoto bien grande in Peru, you know, like there was just no way to leave. They were quite literally thrown into poverty overnight, and they had to figure it out. Once again, no options, you know, and it was five of us. It was my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, and I, and we couldn't live in Peru anymore. So my dad had to leave Peru first. He went to Mexico, actually, Mexicali, and he got a job at this like stand to sell bags. So my dad was selling bags for 45 days to try to make money to try to bring us over, and they never actually paid him. So after 45 days, he was like, "Where's my money?" They were like, "What money? You know, you're not from here. We don't got to give you shit."
Wow.
So my dad was like, "Really?" Once again, no options. Be like, so my dad opted to come to New York. My grandma was living here in Jackson Heights.
The hub.
The Jackson Heights, yo. That's home. And then my grandma has a 1-bedroom apartment. And my dad went over there and he started working. He started working with cars. That's his background. Automotive engineering. So he started just like being a car salesman, and then slowly but surely, my sister came. I believe she was, I want to say 7, maybe 8. She came because she missed my dad so much. And my mom was like, "Okay, tú anda." And then she went, stayed with my grandma. And then a couple months later, then my mom came. And then a couple months later, then my brother, me, my aunt, and my grandma came over. So we were separated for about a year, and I was only 2 years old.
God.
So it was really traumatic, especially like me finally coming over. I didn't recognize my mom. I didn't want her to touch me. I'm like, who is this lady? Who are you? You know, so it was, my mom had to reprogram my 2-year-old mind to be like, I'm your mom and you better listen to me, you know, but obviously you can't do that, you know, so she had to be real delicate with the situation because she was also fragile. We were living in a 1-bedroom apartment. It was all of us, and my grandma and my aunt had to stay with me because I only listened to them. I didn't listen to anybody else, my grandma, my aunt. So my mom was like, before you guys leave, and she's thrown into like an existential 2-year-old crisis because she's no longer seeing her primary caregivers for the last year. You guys should stay for a month. So it was like 7 of us staying in a 1-bedroom apartment, tiny as fuck. My grandma still has it to this day. And just trying to, no options, man. Just like, there's no options but just keep going. So my dad like worked, and my mom tried to like, you know, repurpose my psyche, my 2-year-old mind. And then my grandma and my aunt left, and then my mom got a job as a beautician. And it was difficult, you know. I was talking to them about their feelings, and there's nothing wrong with being a beautician, but when you're a psychologist, you know, you obviously, once again, no options, so you take what you can. But it's like, you know, being here, an immigrant in the United States, and then people talking to you all the ways that they talk to immigrants here. You know, my mom worked also in Jackson Heights, but like people were paying no attention. She's like, you know, she's just brand new here, so we can like give her whatever money we want to give her, or just treat her the way because she has no options, you know. So it can be quite literally weaponized against you.
Yeah,
so,
even like the immigrants on immigrants, because Jackson Heights is the immigrant hub for all types of Latinx peoples, all types. So we end up taking almost advantage of each other, unfortunately. And it's like, you know, really sad, you know, plus what the government from all these Latin American countries do to each other, where now we have been programmed to think like, oh, los mexicanos son lazy. That's what, you know, ex-government tells us to view Mexicans as, or Colombians, or other Peruvians, or Black immigrants.
Yo, on some real, like, governments really try to weaponize this nationalism, like, and you know, people obviously, like, they just, I mean, to be honest, the root is all colonialism, you know, white supremacy, and that's really the, I think, the layers of hatred when you unpack them, you see for what it is.
It's like really incredible to hear, you know, their story of like resilience, the 1-bedroom apartment, because I think that's also a story that most of us immigrants have, you know, sleeping in a 1-bedroom. You know, my parents, when we arrived, we started in my uncle's 1-bedroom.
Yo, shout out
basement.
to the 1-bedrooms. Don't sleep on the 1-bedrooms, you heard.
1-bedroom apartment in the basement. You know, we had the bed. Me, my mom, and my sister had the bed, and my dad and my uncle had the couches. And then once we moved, we went to another 1-bedroom in another basement. But then we all slept on one queen-size bed. You know, and my dad had his feet up in the chair. And I just remember those things, like, you know, as part of the humbling journey, you know, remembering our journey from being immigrants to, you know, living our lives and situating ourselves. You know, it's very humbling, and it reminds me to not judge other people's journey, because you never know where other people, you know, come from, or what they had to do to get to where they are.
Yeah, and it's, I feel like within that immigration story, I'm also reminded, I think it's like, it goes hand in hand, at just how much this country doesn't uses immigrants, you know, and our power and our energy, but as well as just like feels like we're indispensable. You know, like I think when my parents got here and we were living in the 1-bedroom in my grandma's apartment, we tried to they rented a house in Queens Village, 217-14, baby. And then we went bankrupt. And that's because, you know, just like I think the language barrier, I think not understanding American politics, and how to navigate those. And obviously, you know, they try to keep how to be successful in the United States
resources,
from people. Yeah, 100%. They kept it from us, and we went into bankruptcy. And we were once again, you know, I feel like looking back in retrospect now as like an adult and thinking about like where my parents' minds was at, I feel like they were really re-triggered because those years, just like looking back, they tried their best to make it as beautiful of a childhood as they can. But I remember, you know, there being like fights between them, and just like sometimes like my mom would just close her door and I could hear her crying. You know, so all those things, like, in retrospect, I am very grateful to have been, you know, given that resilience and be where we are today. It's been a journey, you know. Shout out to therapy.
Yeah, for real. For real, because it's like I remember tough moments as well that, you know, in remembering them and also with help of therapy, kind of almost makes me loosen that grip on resent. Because, you know, being a child of immigrant, also being the oldest, you know, you also are a parent yourself, you know, and you don't notice the resent then, but you do notice it later on. And then it therapy helped me loosen the resentment that I had to, you know, especially my mother most of all, because it also reminded me that she had to make I wouldn't even call it a choice because it wasn't a choice. It was like a decision of, you know, I need to do this so my kids could survive. Because if I don't do this or if I don't endure this, then what's going to become of my children?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of, you know, immigrant parents, whether they're single or not, you know, they are almost put up, you know, between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because of survival.
I really only started noticing, like, I've been coming into, like, understanding where their minds are at in terms of immigrating, in terms of like what happened in Peru only within like the last 3 years. Because I used to resent them because they were just so emotionally unavailable, you know, like, and again, it's a privilege, you know, to be able to your mom to be like, how does that make you feel? You know, like that conversation, how does that make you feel, girl? It was go to work, you know.
Yes.
It was like I have to do all this shit. Like, no.
Yeah, there's literally no time for feelings.
No times.
Like, ponte a trabajar, limpia tu cuarto, haz algo.
Yeah, and I think, you know, my dad has that mentality a lot too. Like, he's not a man that shows a lot of emotions, and I only started understanding that within the last 3 years of when I created Alegría Pero Next, and I really started asking them about like what happened in Peru. Can we have a conversation about that? And just listening to the traumatic stories that happened right before they decided to immigrate, you know, being stuck on a bridge that Sendero Luminoso took and they bombed El Palacio de Gobierno right next to their car. You know, my dad and my mom were like, yo, we were in the car with your brother and this guy pulled up next to our car because El Palacio de Gobierno was right in front of them with a fucking missile and launched the missile at the Palacio de Gobierno. You know, and my mom was like, maybe it's time to leave Peru, you know.
Yeah.
Like, and that was only one story.
Justo cuando estamos casi en medio del Palacio de Gobierno enfrente, comienza una balacera, mamá. Dios mío, los terroristas estaban en esta pista y comienzan a atacar no sé, con proyectiles, yo qué sé, no, yo no sé qué cosa, porque ellos querían atemorizar al gobierno. Eso era la cosa, ¿no es cierto? De alguna manera. Delante de nosotros, mamá, nosotros, así que yo agarré a mi hijo, me escondí debajo de eso así, imagínate, dentro de un carro. Y las balas, mamá, pero era Entonces, y nosotros ahí echaditos todo y ya pasó de los proyectiles y nosotros metidos ahí, mamá, delante de nosotros toda la cuestión. Y yo decía, Dios mío, Señor, no, ya nos morimos, porque claro, pues si le cae uno, imagínate, al carro, nosotros nos desaparece. Temblábamos ahí, cuando el terrorismo llega, pero tú no sabes lo que nos pasó a nosotros, pues. Eran como las 7 de la noche, y me vengo al cuarto corriendo y comienzan a reventar bombas, 15 bombas. ¡Pum! ¡Pum! Y se escuchaba así como que venían las bombas, y yo ahí nosotros metidos debajo de las camas, en la cama así, agáchense, pero yo decía, Dios mío, ¿qué está pasando? Las bombas están tirando. Yo pensaba en mi mente que las bombas, los terroristas estaban tirando bombas a las casas, venían tirando a cada casa. Y yo decía, ahorita nos tiran a nosotros, ya se está como acercando. No quería yo, pero ni salir, porque era una cosa horrible, unos nervios terribles. Entonces después, como a las 11 de la noche, toque de queda.
¿Qué es eso?
El toque de queda es cuando el gobierno dice la ciudad...
Shutdown.
Yeah. Todo Lima.
Damn.
Todo Lima. Se establece el toque de queda desde las 11 de la noche hasta las 6 de la mañana. Todo aquel que sale entre esas horas era fusilado. Estuvimos como 2 meses con toque de queda. Y, nosotros hemos pasado cosas pero fuertísimas en Perú. Entonces, y claro, tú escuchabas en las mañanas, cuando tú te levantabas de tu cama, que a tu casa irte al trabajo, la sangre aquí, sangre allá. Ahí en la avenida de Sion, cerca de nuestro distrito, de nuestras calles donde vivíamos. Eso nunca se había visto en Perú. La sangre acá, sangre allá, había matado 20 muertos por lo menos en el área de nosotros. No, ya pues uno tiene miedo de salir.
You know, my dad tells me of stories when he got kidnapped in Peru by not Sendero Luminoso, but because the economy was so bad that people just fucking needed money, you know? And it's crazy, you know, they took him to La Avenida Circunvalación, and they played Russian roulette with him. He threw him on the floor, and they were like, I'm just going to keep clicking until you die. And my dad told me that he came into like this like spiritual like experience happened to him where it was literally like a dead construction site. It was dark, and a house behind him. My dad is a God-fearing man, so he was like, there was a house behind me that just lit up, and he was like, 100 kids out of this bright light came running out, and the people that kidnapped me got so scared and ran away, and that's why I didn't die. You know, low-key, maybe está exagerando, but like, you know, like I'm sure that did happen too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'd believe it.
I believe it too.
I believe it 100% because God works in mysterious ways.
Mm-hmm. And that was probably my father's my grandfather, my father's father. My grandfather passed away when he was 18. He was an alcoholic and he overdosed. And I think that's the person that has been like helping my dad. But that's such another true narrative to Peru. You know, people back in the day, you know, we're going through such difficult times, especially people in poverty, that their solutions to these problems was to drink alcohol or escape somehow. And that's why, you know, that statistic is real. Like 70% of homes in Peru are single-parent homes.
It's traumatic experiences, definitely, regardless of what you have witnessed, the emotions sometimes are so unbearable that substances help us cope. You know, take those feelings away, even if it is for like a moment. And that moment sometimes feels so good that you just want it to stay. And that is what happens to, you know, most of us with things that we've seen, things that we feel from the fucked up shit that happens in our neighborhoods. how was it for you growing up with your siblings in the U.S.? Like with school, making friends?
Ugh. It was really hard, honestly. I think my parents, once again, like tried to shield us from everything. So all the money that they had, they really tried to put into our education, because that's what, is ingrained in your mind. Education will liberate you. No, actually, not even that. Being in a good school will liberate you, quote unquote. So my parents did everything they could to put us in really good schools, and unsurprising, good schools equals racism. So my upbringing wasn't exactly great. I in my school I was I'm gonna say it, St. Greg's, all right, holding y'all accountable. St. Greg's in Queens Village, and I was one of 3 people of color. It was me. And granted, I'm light skinned, so you already know. It was me, and then it was my friend Seven, who is Indian, and then my friend Alexandra, who is Filipino, actually was 4, and then my homegirl, Cristina, who was Puerto Rican, and that's it. And everybody else was white. And I would often get picked on, including by teachers. Like, I remember, I have a vivid memory when I was like 3rd grade, in like a sea of white people, white kids. My teacher came out there. She was like checking homework, and she started coughing next to me. She's like, "Oh my God, you smell." She's like, "What do you have for breakfast at your house?" And I was like, I don't know how old you are in 3rd grade, but that was traumatized, like literally traumatizing. And that gives permission for other kids to bully you.
Yeah.
So I got I was very much alone. When I was younger, I stuck to my people of color, but they were also like cool kids too, low key. So I was like a little bit of a dweeb when I was younger, and I was very picked on by these white people, and those white people had money, so like their parents would drop them off in like Mercedes and shit,
Yo,
so
these like Catholic schools, man.
Yeah, man, for real, like so fucking racist. Like I can count probably on one hand how many good memories I've had at that school. And I thankfully left when I was like in 5th grade. And I moved to the border of Queens and Long Island, Valley Stream. And then I went to a public school, and the border of Queens and Long Island, like it's very blurred lines.
Yes.
And I feel like it's very Queens where I grew up. That's why, like, I rep Long Island, but I feel very Queens, because like everybody there was immigrant. It was predominantly a black and brown neighborhood, and that's when I first understood like what I was feeling. I could put into words. I was like, this feels very different from where I was, So it just goes to show you, like, putting your kids in the best schools doesn't mean anything. I think I was, if anything, held back. My spirit was broken when I was a kid. People would make fun of me because they were like, "What the fuck is a Peru?" Like, my mom would bring me with chicha, and obviously chicha's delicious, yo.
Yes.
I'm like, give
Full
me
of
that shit all
antioxidants.
fucking day.
Full
so
of
I brought that shit to
antioxidants, people.
school. And people were like, "What the fuck is this?" I'm like, it's chicha. You taste it. They were like, "I'm not tasting that disgusting shit." You know what I mean? I feel real fucking bad.
Yeah.
Real fucking bad. So I get to Valley Stream, and just felt more accepted there. Like, there were black people. I'm like, thank you. Like, what the fuck is that shit where I was? So yeah, it was like a traumatizing childhood a little bit.
That's like insane. Man, fucking white people, these rich white people.
Yeah.
It's really insane how our countries hold such a pedestal to like good educations, to, you gotta listen to your teacher and XYZ, but sometimes, these teachers end up causing the
so much
trauma.
harm. So much. There's so many stories that I can pull out. Like, another one, I think I was like in 3rd grade too. I was just, because I think I was like, I don't want to say the word bullied, but there are like different layers to it. But I definitely was picked on a lot, and it stemmed a lot, I think, a lot from how my teachers treated me, because I was visibly the immigrant kid. My English wasn't great. I was learning as I was in school, in a Catholic school. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
So I just remember taking a spelling test, And I was like, yo, I don't know these words. Like, this shit is really hard. And so I was like, I'm not even gonna write anything down because I'm just gonna fail. And my teacher walks over to me and sees my paper. We're on like question 7. I remember this, like, vivid memories because it's like burned into like my fucking psyche of trauma. And she sees that like I'm on question 7, and she was like, why haven't you written anything down? I was like, I don't know these words. And she literally slams her hands on my desk, and then she goes like this, and she's like, she points at my forehead, and she's like, you need to think like that, yo.
Oh, that's crazy.
And like these some of these things I haven't even told my mom until I got much older, cause like I don't know how old you are in 3rd grade, but like it was traumatizing. Yo. I left that school like a shell of who I was. Like who I am today in terms of a very outgoing person, like night and day, I would say, from my childhood.
Yeah, my sister went through something like that too. I remember, I think she was like in the 1st grade. We went to PS 124, Osmond Church School, across the Belt Parkway in South Jamaica.
Hey.
Because that's where we from.
Southside.
And Miss Oliver, she looked like the white crypt keeper. Very old.
Oh, the Tales from the Crypt?
Yes, Tales from the Crypt. It was just so scary. And they were doing kind of like a spelling test or the ABCs or something.
Always a spelling
yes, right? And then I get a call. I'm like in class, and they bring me down. And I'm like, what the hell?
I'm like, y'all about to award me for my incredible spelling?
So I go down there, and she's there like, does your sister do her homework or XYZ or some shit like that? And I'm like, what? I don't understand. Like, yeah, she does her homework. Like, well, why doesn't she know her ABCs? Why can't she spell her name? And I'm like, what do you mean she knows how to spell her name, right? With the ruler, she slams the ruler on the desk.
Oh, hell no.
And my sister, like, jumps. And
ay, pobrecita.
Yo, and my sister back then had, like, the cutest little face. They used to call her Risita because all she would do would laugh. Head full of curls.
Ay,
and she's there. She starts crying. She's like, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm like, you're scaring her. And I start screaming at her. You're scaring her. And I grabbed a chair.
My bitch.
And I threw it across her. And I'm like, don't you hurt my sister. That I love you.
Yo, where are you at when I need help? I'm going to just bring you everywhere. I'm be like, babe, you got the chair?
It was just so fucking... Oh, my God. It was just like these fucking teachers. And thankfully, 4th grade, we left because I also got bullied there. I was like the 1%. It was predominantly like all black. But the teachers were so like cruel, or they didn't care, and that's what pushed kids.
And then they have the audacity to tell us that we have bad attitudes.
Yes.
You know, be like, do you understand where this is coming from?
Yes.
I'm quite literally being bullied, not just by kids, but by
the teachers.
Oh.
Yep. Growing up, did you ever, obviously you felt out of place from the lack of representation. You know, how did that make you feel? Not more than make you feel, but how did you view yourself from the lack of representation?
It's really difficult. I think with representation, we're able to like validate, you know, our feelings and our experience. And I think also like the migration story of my parents, they didn't immediately like, they were proud of our Peruvian culture, but I think for the first like maybe 10, 15 years or so, they just were like kind of over it. You know, especially I think there's like a narrative with, you know, el enemigo del peruano es otro peruano, you know.
Yeah.
So a lot of things also happen. I was saying they kidnapped my dad. It wasn't Sendero Milos. It was like fellow Peruvian people that just knew my dad and the businesses he was in, and they knew he had like a little bit of money. So I think there were also like they had a bad taste, about like what it meant to be Peruvian. So it didn't immediately kind of instill in us. And it was most basic things like the food, like let's name the 12 Incas, things like that. But I think in terms of like orgullo and proudness, took them a little bit longer. And naturally, that's how I felt too. Like I wasn't outwardly seeking it. I low key was fucking Puerto Rican when I was younger because I wasn't Peruvian. I was like, I had a fucking target on my back every time I said I was Peruvian because kids, at that age, we weren't one of the 12 wonders yet.
No.
Fucking white people weren't there yet.
No.
So naturally, nobody knew where that was. Nobody could tell you where on the map it was, and that was just like the opening to getting made fun of.
You were either black, white, Mexican, and you didn't want to be Mexican.
Back then.
And then back then there was only Puerto Ricans. They weren't Dominicans yet.
Yeah. Well, no. Where I was, there was Puerto Ricans, there was Colombians, and Dominicans. Because then I went to high school in College Point.
Gotcha.
And even there, like there was, I think in my entire class, I'm gonna say her name. Shout out to Dora. Dora and I were the only, my homegirl Dora from high school were the only Peruvians in our entire graduating class. And so it was difficult to like, feel validated, feel proud of it when your entire childhood you're made fun of. I literally wanted to pack up my trauma and just put it in a tight, cute little box with a bow and throw it out.
Yo, for real.
And forget about it. And as I got older, like I just seeing other people embrace, their representation and embrace and see all this beauty that I was just like, I think I need to, in order to understand myself, I think I started my orgullo in simultaneous as I started my spiritual journey. And I did do other things that were outside of my culture until I was like, no, I think I really should honor my ancestors and practice the religion that I came from and practice and try to understand like who we are a little bit more. And that kind of like liberated me almost like to really understanding a little more about myself.
Facts to that. I feel, like I've always, like I got into a discussion yesterday with my coworkers while we were cleaning up because they started playing disco. Yeah, and I fucking love disco. I always say I was born during the disco era because disco is my shit. And I started talking to them like, my family is like Peruvian, but I didn't really know Peru till I got older, except for like the food and stuff. I grew up listening to disco, to Motown. I started listening to like hip hop, but it was more like monitored because, the cursing and shit like that. But that's how I grew up with so much blackness, and Peru was, as I got older, I mean, like we listened to salsa and stuff like that, but the root of salsa is also black. We had that's the only Latinx thing that we had was la salsa y la comida. But Motown and disco, that's like my main shit. And it wasn't until I got older, went through my own spiritual journey, that I'm just like, a lot of like, I felt like peace in my heart, almost. Like I was very big into my ancestors and trying to connect with them. And the more I connected with them, the more I connected with more spirituality, the more at peace I felt on the inside.
That's so beautiful. I think it's always necessary for people to, try their best to engage in the spiritual journey of understanding yourself.
Yeah.
Because that is a spiritual journey. And even I feel like my mom is one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to that, because she has a lot of trauma in her life, like from so many things, from growing up in Peru, from migrating here and leaving her entire family. Like here in New York, we don't have family. Like we have my grandma, and then we have my dad's second cousins in Connecticut, and then that's it. So my mom grew up in a huge family, you know, and also she's first generation college grad, so it's like a lot of things on her shoulders, and so she's kept quiet about a lot of things. And now in her life, I see that she's tapping into a more spiritual side of herself, where she's able to unpack these traumas. So like your spiritual journey is very much a healing journey, and that, and you know, just seeing her try to figure out like herself and unpack all these things have inspired me to like start Alegría Pero Next, start asking these questions, and try to figure out like what the fuck is happening in my head and in my soul and my spirit.
Yeah. From the lack of representation, I feel like it has pushed us more and more to become our own storytellers.
Yes.
What pushed you to take a step further and create the platforms you've created?
Do you want me to start with Hip Hop Zombies, or do you want to start at...
We can start as far back as you want.
Well, so I started Hip Hop Zombies because I was tired of so I went to school. I went to school for forensic psychology, and I graduated for forensic psychology, and it ended up being a place of just like a lot of toxicity. Like I grew to a place where I was just like, my job shouldn't exist because I shouldn't be keeping people within cages, you know. Like that's what a forensic psychologist, the purpose of a forensic psychologist is to rehabilitate an inmate back into society. And I'm like, ew.
Are we like the same person? Because like that was one of my passions.
Yo, John Jay.
That was one of my passions. That was like my goal, forensic psychology.
It was my goal too, until I reached it, and I was like, this feels really, really like traumatizing. You know, like having to go to Rikers Island, having to speak to these imprisoned people. When in reality they should just have been put into a rehabilitation program. You know, I feel like the forensic psychologist facilitates keeping people in cages, and I couldn't do that anymore. So I graduated. I did it for very, very little, like low key, like finished my clinicals, and I'm like, and I'm done. So I was put into a very depressed state because I was like, I just wasted how many years of school that I wanted to find my joy, and my joy had always been hip hop. You know, growing up in Queens Village. You know, shout out to A Tribe Called Quest.
Yo.
You know, R.I.P. Fife Dog, and I was just like, this is what's bringing me joy. So I would just like started interviewing like friends, you know, homies coming up, rappers, and I created a whole like a website out of that with one of my boys back in the day, and then transition. Sorry, what was the question again? I'm like, where am I going with this?
Keep going. It's the platforms you've created.
Why did I create them?
What let me repeat the question.
I'm like, where am I going with this, girl? Wrap it up.
What pushed you to take a step further and create the platforms you've created? Obviously, you know, from the lack of representation, I feel that it has pushed us to become our own storytellers. You know,
now that I'm reflecting on this question, it almost feels like the same story of my parents. I'm pushed to a place of no options, of a place of like, I am depressed. How can I, you know, make lemonade with lemons? That's the American expression, right?
Yeah.
Limonada. Chicha. How can I make chicha with this fucking corn? So with Hip Hop Zombies, it was the same thing, you know, graduating, being very depressed, not wanting to continue in what I studied, and just wanting to create my own community of joy. And quite literally now, you know, 10 years later, I'm doing the same thing with Alegría Pero Next. You know, I got to a place where I honestly like felt really depressed. You know, I feel like I was plateauing in my career and in my life, and I had a lot of trauma that, you know very well, of like what I was going through, that I just needed to figure out, you know, and I wanted to operate from a place of joy, and I just sat myself down and I was like, what brings you joy, girl? Like, how are you doing? You know, how's your spirit feel? And I was very broken. You know, we've had a lot of conversations about this. And one thing was my spiritual journey. You know, I felt that I needed to embark on this healing journey, and my identity was part of it. and that's why Alegría Peronex came to be, out of a place of just like wanting to find a community, wanting to find joy, trying to understand my history, my ancestors, you know, my country, also trying to bring joy into my own household, because I started asking my parents questions about their immigration story and their time in Peru, and it was very much also wrapped up in like sadness. So I think both of these communities that I've created, or companies, all come from a place of wanting to seek joy, and self-soothe myself. Self-soothe. Self-soothe.
Self-soothe.
Still can't get a hold of these American.
Listen,
these English is hard.
It ain't my first language, so
hard,
I don't care. But no, yeah, definitely. It's. I was just talking to Marcela about it while we were like setting up, and I'm like, we've gone through so many traumatic shit,
so much,
in our lives. But from the ugly, beautiful things can grow.
Yes, Lord, yes.
Like a flower that grows from a crack in the concrete.
Or black flowers grow.
Yeah. So, you know, and then my name, Black Flowers Grow, is rebirth. You know, black flowers signifying death and this and that. But death is a rebirth.
Absolutely.
You know, and that is why, you know, I'm in a constant rebirth. You know, we're not monolithic. You know, we constantly change. We constantly strive to be better. You know, we create different things, and it's okay to create something to fill a void that we need. And then once it's great and you're like, you know what, I did that. Time to move on to the next thing. And
so
it's
hard,
okay.
though. That's so hard. I feel like anytime I've birthed a project, it takes so long for me to be proud of myself. And even like, because sometimes I feel like when I've created things out of joy, it's low-key creating from trauma, you know, and even when I release it, it's the period of mourning, you know, and I've never had the language to be able to say that, because like nobody ever teaches you to mourn things outside of people who are dead, you know, but we need to mourn getting over our traumas. You know, we've built our identities around trauma, that when you're finally like over the hill and you're able to like, you know, you're able to you're able to surpass your demons and or live above them, that you have to mourn that. You know, now you're creating a new identity for yourself, and that's what I did 3 years ago when it started at Alegría Peronex. Is how do I remove this trauma from myself, or at least live above it and form a new identity? And that's, you know, the joy that I was trying to find.
That's facts. I feel like with Alegría Peronex, it definitely has pushed me to create a better identity for myself. You know, I am both Black and Indigenous. You know, my grandma, who was a Black Peruvian, married an Indigenous man, and on my dad's side, the same thing. His mom was Indigenous. You know, and it's how can I identify that honors them both? Because I can no longer check the other box, because the other box doesn't give me much of an option but a line to describe who I am. But who am I really?
That's the existential question.
Yep. How has your art helped you?
Oh, girl. I think my art really has been a blessing from God, from the ancestors, from my elders, as like the push I needed to survive. You know, like I really think like I got to a place where I was just very dark, and I think art was the most natural thing for me to express how I'm feeling and the goal in life that I want to achieve. You know, like I think when I started the Peruvian photo series before it became Alegría Peronex, I just needed to look for beauty and joy, you know, within myself and within my community. And I needed to take off this lens, this mask of just negativity that I was like so focused on. I mean, also I didn't have a choice. Like I was like really fucking depressed. So I think Alegría Pero Next, the series started off as like, how can I find joy in everything I do? So I wanted to dress you all in beautiful colors, and I wanted you to be smiling, because I wanted to remind people like, yo, we're like, among all this bullshit, there's so much joy that we really need to like, you know, just be thankful for. And I was thankful to meet everybody. You know, when I did the photo series, like I created a safe space where we, like, y'all just didn't come in and I was like, pictures and bye, you know, like it was like, sit down.
It was so beautiful.
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
You know, like remember, like I was laying down for a while with you guys, like and there was food, and it was like I tried my best to create a safe space, a healing space. And everybody that left, they were like, thank you. And I'm like, thank you.
For real.
Like I feel like conversations are frequencies, you know, and healing frequencies, especially when you're with a loved one. And if you're engaging in a frequency with somebody that loves you or wants the best for you and is seeking joy, I think that in itself is just very healing.
Yes.
You know, like healing can come in the form of frequencies, you know, in the singing bowls. That's what it is.
That outfit that I wore for the Alegría Pero Next, the Ñusca outfit, oh my God, like
So
I
beautiful.
called my aunt,
I
who called her
know.
friend. You know, once I brought it home, I put it on and I put some music, and Marcela caught a video of me like dancing in it, and it just brought me so much joy and reminded me of a part of my childhood where I was happy than, you know, being in el Parque de las Leyendas. Because I feel like all, like, little Peruanitas, we have that picture in el Parque de las Leyendas with our little Ñusca outfit holding the little thing. And, you know, I was happier then. And I wanted to feel that same way. And I did so much research, and I listened to so much music that I'm just like, oh my God, you know, this is what Alegría Pero Next is. This is that alegría, you know, outside of all, you know, the horrible stuff, because, you know, we do have to, you know, say that, you know, there is the good and there is the bad, you know, and in honoring the bad aspects of, you know, what is Peruanidad, because, you know, it does have bad aspects.
Absolutely.
You know, there is joy in that, because you're coming to terms with the trauma that being a Peruano is, because there's it's our Peruvian identity does hold a lot of trauma.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was part of like the healing process to, at least for me, to start with joy, find community, and then engage in meaningful dialogue with your community members, you know, in a safe and respected manner. And it was true, you know, like just talking to you, even corresponding with you via email before you came through was also you were like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to find this. And people were like crying.
Yeah.
Like I constructed, like a background where I added, you know, I was like, if you want, you could bring something, bring your talisman, you know, whatever that means to you, or wear armor, or whatever. I just wanted people to just be happy and feel joy. Bring whatever you want to wear in the spirit of your armor, in the spirit of your joy.
Word.
And then tell me your narratives. You know, I want to get to know you. I want to form community with you. I felt lost, and that's why I was like, can I give you a hug? Like, you know, everybody that came in that day, fuck Rona, because we can't, like, but, like, I just, like, hugged all of you for, like, embraced you all. I'm like, thank you for being part of this. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come to Brooklyn. Like, I forgot what part of Brooklyn it was in, but it was deep.
Bushwick.
It was Bushwick?
That's Bushwick.
Really?
That's part of Bushwick, yeah.
I thought it was a lot deeper.
Nope. Because it's, Yeah, it's still part of Bushwick. Mayday Space is still part of Bushwick.
No, I'm talking about where we took the pictures.
Oh,
the photos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That was deep.
I think that could have been Park Slope or Sunset.
Maybe.
Sunset?
Yeah. It was. What's that park? The Park Slope, right? Yeah.
Prospect.
Prospect.
Okay.
Yeah, it was right by. So it was deep.
Yeah.
And everybody came through. And I think only maybe like 2 people lived in Brooklyn. And somebody came from like Jersey, you know.
I took a cab. I was just like, I am taking a cab because I need to, like, not pulling all that on the train. But yeah, it was so beautiful. And I remember that day in like Mayday Space. I've never seen so many Peruvians.
Me either.
In a room.
I mean, I've seen el señor de los
De los
milagros.
Milagros. You know, but...
Yeah, I know, but they're all toxic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
although it is beautiful, La Procesión is like super beautiful, and then you have the arroz con pato afterwards.
Uy,
you know?
Ay, Dios mío. Ay,
But-
Dios mío, arroz con plata. Uy.
But,
Yeah.
you know, but I remember Lucia, who's
Oh, yeah.
part of Raíces. The way she cried, and I'm just like, I felt that. I'm like, damn you, I'm like crying just like that on the inside, because it's like almost like this thing has like lifted off your shoulders, and it's like in that moment we all found joy within each other. You know, in that moment, that saying, el peor enemigo de un peruano es otro peruano. In that moment, we weren't enemigos. We all needed that moment.
Absolutely. I can't, like, I think it was like, it was so many people. The day of the gallery in Mayday Space, it was like it was November 18th, November 20th, 2018. And I had this like older Afro-Peruvian woman come up to me, and she's elder, you know, and she was like, thank you. She's like, I don't see anywhere people centering a Black woman from Peru. And in the program that I created for Alegría Pero Next, I put Mika's face on there, as an Afro-Peruvian woman to represent like the entire event. And I got backlash. There was a lot of backlash from people that were like RSVPing to the event. Fucking peruanos, yo. They were like, why are you putting a Black woman? You know, you should put like an Andean woman. You know, that's who represents our culture. I'm like, do they? Because if you ask me, they're Andean. You know, like they ain't Peruvian. And when have we ever help them out except in an exploitative manner?
Exactly.
You know, we want to say that Andean people, you know, like, oh, we love them, right? But when it comes to policy, when it comes to direct action, when it comes to solidarity work, they have the lowest they have actually the highest mental health issues when it comes to the Andean territory.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and that's because of no access to healthcare intentionally by the government. So that's why I was actually kind of glad that they would say that, because I'm like, this was a point of conversation, an in-group conversation. You know, Kat Lazo, like, she says that a lot. She's like a big inspiration to me for having for the idea of behind like in-group conversations, and not to be tired and not to dismiss people, be like, oh, I don't want to talk about this. You know, it's like when you ask me, you know, why I put a Black woman, and you're gonna get a direct answer from me, and it's gonna be an answer based in facts. And
definitely.
And I had a lot of people that were emailing me, be like, I don't understand. And then, you know, I also had a bunch of trans Peruvian people on there too. That's fucking unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in the United States, like, obviously the trans movement within Peru is like amazing, but in terms of like a gallery setting, to put a trans Peruvian person, a trans Black Peruvian person, you know, like it was a lot of firsts for many people that night.
Yeah. Like, I'm so happy that you did put a Black Peruvian person in the forefront, because, you know, one of the things that I told you was, like, when I look at Mika, I look at my grandma. And she has been the center focus of my identity, because a lot of the trauma that I hold about my identity, what I look like, my skin color, has come from her. Because living as a Black woman in Peru,
difficult. Yeah.
extremely difficult, and I don't want to take away from how the indigenous people have lived, continue living. You know, speaking for my grandma, you know, a lot of the things that she educated me on about skin color, it's always, you know, para levantar la raza, this is who you have to be with. And even though she was coming from a place of love and trying to protect me from going through the same things that she has gone through, this is how, you know, she had to show her love. And a lot of it was finding forgiveness in that. As much as I love her, I also have to forgive that it wasn't her fault. That what I thought of myself wasn't completely her fault. It was part of trauma, you know?
Yes, growth.
You know,
a lot of growth.
Therapy,
Black
growth.
flowers, growth.
Yes. What do you hope to leave for generations to come?
What do I hope to leave for generations to come? I really just want people to lead with love. I think love and compassion has been vital to my own growth and the growth of, I think, a lot of people around me. And understanding, you know, and even in the story that you just shared with me, like understanding, like finding the love in that, you know, you understand your grandma, you know, why she said she had the mentality that she had, and that's love, you know, and leading with love first and compassion and understanding someone, I think is quite literally the path to liberation. You know, what is activism if not like compassion in action? You know, and I think that's how we lead to a place of liberation. It's just not judging people, and you know, leading, be like, maybe they had a bad day or something like that. Even beginning there, you know, and understanding that people act because they are trying to understand their traumas, and maybe that manifests in different ways, and understanding when you have to walk away from a situation, leading with love, you know. So I think if the only thing, you know, my legacy can inspire people to do is just be compassionate, lead with love. Love. I'm gonna say with a B, add the B at the end. That's cute.
Yeah, I definitely, I agree with that. I think that leading with love and empathy and compassion definitely changes your whole outlook towards people. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, again, we never know a person's journey and their story on how they came to be, you know, however they're leading their life, what was the result of it, you know. And I think, you know, with empathy and free of judgment.
And let me tell you, all those things that you just said are difficult, ongoing processes. And I have to catch myself, because sometimes my perspective can come from a place of like negativity. But you know, even in those moments, like leading with love is also showing up for myself. And being like, don't get upset at that situation. Don't let that person, you know, give you a bad day, or don't, you know, just lead with love for myself. And then in hopes that it is outward too.
Yeah. Looking back, would you change anything?
Nah, man. Nah, not at all. Because I am on this path, and I feel like I'm being divinely guided. And pain, from what I'm understanding these days, is a catalyst for so much growth and beauty. And a human experience without pain, you know, is a human experience that still needs growth. And you know, pain in this journey that I'm on now, that has been filled with so many ups and downs and trauma and pain, I think is the catalyst for me becoming the compassionate person that I'm slowly starting to become. And the human experience is unfortunate to say, but I think we learn so much from pain. And and it could be this powerful force that cripples us and makes us into a person that we don't want to become, or hold on, I don't want to say cripple. I feel like that's like offensive. That changes. I'm gonna just say, yeah. Pain can change us into like this really negative person, or pain can inspire us to learn and be better and rise above, you know, how we were treated. So I wouldn't change anything, you know, down to even like the worst parts of it. I think it's a part of the journey that I have to be on, and the purpose that I serve here on this earth, on this plane of existence. Unfortunately, I had to go through these things to be able to be a better person, and I've come to, you know, to be at peace with it at this moment.
I like that. All right, y'all, it's time for the One Piece, and not to be confused with that widely popular anime we all know and love.
Ow, ow.
This is that one piece of advice that you'd give to a younger you.
Oh my God.
So, Connie,
Girl.
after everything, the trials and tribulations, what advice would you give to a younger you?
It's hard. I feel like one piece of advice isn't enough to guide me. I think I was just, unfortunately, I've dealt with a lot of different things, and I would say maybe the one piece is just stay strong. You know, like you are being divinely guided. You know, like hang in there, girl. Like it's hard. You about to make me cry. Like, but it was so hard. You know, like so stay strong.
I like that. I mean, I try to say that to myself every day that I wake up.
Bitch.
Yo, like,
Where is the dembo when we need it?
and, you know, like when I text, like I've been trying to. And when I wake up, I text Marcela, you know, hey, good morning. It's going to be a great day today. Because sometimes we need that, you know, and tell ourselves, be strong. Today is going to be a great day.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's also a change of perspective. That's what I'm recently learned, so I don't think I'm an expert here. But, like, sometimes it's just a change of perspective. And, like, you know, a situation that happened recently, all I had to do was change my perspective on it. And I was like, wow, there's actually a lot of love here, and I'm feeling a lot of gratitude. And if I didn't take those moments like you do in the morning, like, it's so important to wake up and just express gratitude. Because in that situation that I was mentioning, like, I had an argument with somebody, and I was just like so upset at the argument that I was you know, I couldn't see the truth in it, and afterwards I was like, this person is mad at me because they want me to do, you know, be better, or they love me so much that they're upset that I'm not doing something. So actually this person showed me a lot of love, and my ego is getting in the way of me being able to see the blessings that this person is trying to show me. So I think that's, you know, always lead with gratitude, always lead with compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
And
so we
for
gotta
others.
be kind to ourselves.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Okay, guys, we've reached the end of this episode. But before I bid you all adieu, I want to pose a question to you all, mi gente. This week, I want to ask, Oye Mi Gente, what is the one question that you found yourself asking over and over these past months? What version of an answer are you living your way into? Piénsalo. Feel free to leave your insight and answers in the comment and review sections. All right, guys, this is it for this week's episode. Remember to follow us at Oye Mi Gente Podcast on IG. We are available on all your favorite streaming platforms. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a comment in the review section. Also follow at Dique Media on IG. And if you want to know more about the Dique Media Network and what we do, you can check the entire Dique Media family on diquemedia.com. Ciao!